Television is probably the most consumed form of media that the world has ever seen. We've seen the greatest fictional TV shows come and go and still get talked about years after they ended because of how good the stories and the characters were. But what about when a show goes on for too long and they just won't quit? There are a lot of shows that I watch today that I feel are dragging on for no reason, but no show competes with the most dragged out show on TV right now, The Chi. Now, I started watching this show around the time that season 5 was getting ready to release off a recommendation from my parents. When I first started watching this show, I really liked it because the characters were really good and they made interesting storylines behind them. But as the show went on, it started to get worse and worse with the characters and the storylines, and it became less interesting to where now they're just dragging it along and they just can't quit for whatever reason. A 7th season was confirmed before the premiere of the second part of the 6th season, and I just sat there saying, why? The 6th season of The Chi just wrapped, and after watching the finale, I wanted to make a video about it because they're forcing it so hard with this show. It's sad to see a show that has so much potential get ruined and keep on getting dragged on for no reason. This show wasn't always this way. The first 2 seasons of The Chi was genuinely some of the best television I ever watched because the characters felt a lot more authentic and the storylines were more balanced. And that is the biggest reason why The Chi fell off. After season 2, they got rid of certain characters and it's been downhill ever since. When main characters Brandon and Reg were killed off and then didn't appear in season 3, that was the start of the downfall of this show. Brandon, played by Jason Mitchell, was the main character of the first 2 seasons and was killed off of the show because of on-set allegations from a fellow female cast member. And Reg, played by Barton Fitzpatrick, was supposedly killed off because he didn't want his character to have a relationship with a trans woman into the next season. Brandon was the best character that the show had to offer, and his story was actually going to get more interesting going into the next season, but they let him go. Since they got rid of him, this show hasn't been the same. They tried to replace Reg with Trig, who is supposedly the older brother of Jake and Reg that we never heard of until the 3rd season, but respectfully, even though Trig is cool, he is not as interesting as Reg was. Season 3 of The Chi was decent, as the biggest storyline of the season was the kidnapping of now main character Keisha, who is the sister of main kid character Kevin, but that storyline also killed off one of the other main characters in Ronnie, who saved Keisha from her kidnapper, and whose story in season 1 pushed the show with him accidentally killing the brother of Brandon, Coogie. The murder of Ronnie was when this show completely lost itself, as season 4 is considered the worst and most forgettable season of the show, as they ruined a lot of characters and suffered from so much bad writing. Every season since season 3 has been a mess of terrible writing with no clear direction of the story. It's clear that after Brandon was killed off, they really didn't know what they wanted to do with this show. My main problem and the biggest issue with this show is the characters. This show adds so many characters in every season for no reason at all, to where they don't know how to balance all of them. Not only that, but the storylines are just all over the place and not interesting at all. There are main characters who have been there since the beginning of the show who we rarely see in later seasons. They will randomly pop up and you'll be like, oh, I forgot this character was even in the show. For starters, the character of Tracy, who was a main character in the first couple of seasons, is one of the most useless characters in the 6th season. She used to have a storyline with the whole rock shelter, but they abandoned that. Literally, if Dude is not involved with her, she has nothing to do and disappears for episodes at a time. Or Emmett's mom Jada, who got back with his dad Darnell at the end of the 5th season, but she is literally giving nothing to do in season 6. Or Nina, who is Kevin's mom, who has no purpose in the story if she's not mad at Kevin about something, which is literally all her character became after like the 2nd season. Then all of a sudden the brat comes back in season 6, who she cheated on Dre with in season 4, and gives her the opportunity to travel the world with her, when they literally only did the dirty one time, and she still goes with her at the end of the season. Dre also disappeared as well in season 6, and we are given no explanation on what happened to her. Or what about the character of Dom, who is never a main character, but every time she's brought back, it's just for her to have sex with somebody and just to show that she still knows how to cook. And just on a side note, I am so sick of the constant sex scenes in this show and just in TV shows in general. Like, I promise you can just cut away before they start and we'll know what's happening. If it's not a critical part of the story, I don't want to see it. Anyway, they'll keep these characters around to remind us that they're still here, but give no actual story with them. Then they will add new characters to try and fit them in with the already complicated story. In season 6 alone, they added around 4 or 5 new characters and gave them each a storyline. For example, the character of Damien was added into the second half of this season, and we don't even get a clear introduction of him. They just have Darnell go, oh, Emmett, this is your brother. Then his storyline is about how supposedly he avoided prison while another guy took the fall for him, and when that guy is introduced, all of his scenes are just him being mad at Damien about taking the blame. Then Bakari's sister Brittany, who was paid by Duda to spy on her brother, but then gets caught up with Gemma in the music stuff. Then that storyline goes nowhere and disappears, just to bring in another storyline where Bakari finds out about it. Or the new pastor character, Pastor Zeke, who his whole character is just a crooked pastor who is there to manipulate Papa and stray him away from what his late father taught him, which turned into another storyline of him supposedly cheating with some white lady affiliated with his church. And then the end of the season brings another storyline where Dre from Power comes out of nowhere and says, "Let me back into your church before I tell everyone about your history." You guys see what I'm talking about? There's at least 20 different storylines with this show, and they did so many of them just to bring in another one that's less interesting than the one before it. The kid characters are also just thrown away for the most part after having a lot to do with the show in previous seasons. Papa's the only kid character who is given a main story since Kevin's actor left the show, but then again, why would you continue this show when the main kid character that everyone liked left? His whole arc after his father died is becoming a pastor just like him, and his story is the only one that they really stick to without giving him another storyline. Jake is still annoying, it has no character development, to where he just cheats on Gemma with Pastor Zeke's wife out of nowhere. That's another thing, whenever a character sees someone that they like, the next scene of them is doing something sexual. Lene and Maisha are given nothing to do but just remind us that they exist. Gemma has a storyline of being a music manager, but then that story is brushed off just to bring in a new one of her possibly being bisexual and cheating on Jake with Bakari's sister Brittany. And let me just talk about Bakari for a second, because he is the definition of lack of character development. His arc this season is finally coming up from under Duda and trying to get out of the gang life. Then when Nuck kills Duda at the end of the season, he asks him to come work for him, and of course, he says yes. Why waste this character's whole season on getting him out of the life just to put him back in? And another thing, why would you have him go back to the same people who literally killed Papa's dad earlier in season 6, who literally took him in and let him stay at his house? Did we just forget about that? Trig's story I don't really even care about anymore because I don't even know what's going on half the time with the mayor stuff. Tiff and Rob literally only show up to change their weed business every episode, and even then I don't care about their story because they've been doing the same thing for the past 2 seasons. Emmett is the only character I really care about in this show, but even then his story gets annoying after a while because he makes dumb decisions and doesn't really think about what he's doing. Timing doesn't really make sense in this show either. My main example of this is the fact that Duda knows that Emmett and Rob tried to kill him, and Duda tells Emmett that the only way he doesn't come out to kill him is if he kills Alicia. But literally 5 or 6 episodes go by, and Duda doesn't go after him until he explodes his car before the finale. He does go after Emmett and warn him that the time is ticking a couple episodes before this, but after that they just completely forget about it until that moment of blowing up the car. Just another example of so many storylines that they have to push them to the side just to make another one. Season 1 and 2 and seasons 3 and 6 feel like completely different shows, and I just question every time I watch it how it got to this point. The finale of season 6 really struck a nerve for me because they showed how hard they're trying to keep this show alive. They finally killed Duda, who was probably the most dragged out and over the top villain ever. They made him do so much over the top nonsense this season just to show us how crazy he is, and it feels more unrealistic than anything. He literally kills one of his goons for chewing gum too loudly. Anyway, this season also brought the character of Alicia, who is Rob's mom, and they try to make us believe how much of a boss she is. Just because she has a lot of money is very snarky and mysterious. Her whole character is there to try to kill Duda because he shot Rob, and there's a moment where she and Rashad literally have him at gunpoint and can easily kill him. There is nobody around, and they can end it once and for all, but what do? They just leave. But they did this to start up a season 7 because the moment when Alicia is about to kill Duda in the finale, Nuck comes out of nowhere and does it and declares himself as the big new boss of the Shy, and Alicia gets all mad and says,
"I'm gonna be your worst fucking nightmare."
Which makes Nuck kill Rob and deliver his body onto her doorstep. They basically set up Nuck versus Alicia in the next season, but I think I can speak for all of Shy fans when I say nobody cares about this rivalry. Nuck is not interesting enough to be the main villain of the story, and Duda was practically the Thanos of this whole show, so him being killed should have been the end of it. But no, they want to milk this show so hard and keep it going when the story realistically should have ended at season 4, because that's when Trig told Duda to leave the city or he'll expose him, and they set that up to be the final season, but they just continue to keep going and going for no reason. You know what, I don't even want to talk about this show anymore. This show had the potential to be on the level of beloved black shows like Snowfall, Power, and The Wire, but the writers ruined it by killing off characters and not having any clear direction of where they want to end the story. The only good thing I can say about this show since season 2 is that it is an amazing all-black cast and they promote mental health for black people in general, because as a black man myself, mental health is a thing that isn't really talked about enough in the black community. But other than that, whoever's in the writers room for this show needs to be fired, because ever since season 3, it's been trash. Season 6 was just a mess of too many characters and storylines that go nowhere. And the crazy part is, I'm probably still gonna watch season 7 to see if they end the story or just what they do with it in general. It is honestly insane how hard this show fell off after season 2. I still watch it, but it is only because it is stupid dumb fun at this point to watch all this stuff happen. Season 7 should be the last season of the show, but if it's not, then somebody must have Showtime in a chokehold over the show, because realistically, no show should go past 6 seasons.